next thing is to hand over to Judith. Judith has owned Touché. Judith and her husband has owned Touché for a number of years, but has never taken her back to her home country of Denmark. She's been in perpetual motion around the Mediterranean, Northern Europe, Svalbard, and as you're going to hear now, three seasons avoiding midges and rain in the Scottish Hebrides, which has to be a record. Judith, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, part of my aim with giving this talk is to show everyone that Scotland is a fantastic destiny. And I think that whole thing about the weather being bad is just something the Scottish made up so they wouldn't get too many tourists. So here we go. So why is it not? Just to see where we are. This little heart down here, that's where Touché is in Panama. And Scotland is what we're going to talk about. And we are mostly, I'm going to concentrate on the Outer Hebrides and my trip to St. Kilda. Yeah. So the boat we've had for 10 years, it's an Island Packet 380. And I'm not saying I wouldn't like a boat like Steve's Navara, but I actually think our boat is quite luxurious. We have heater, we have an arch with davits, and we have a cockpit enclosure. So we're very happy about it. And yes, I bought it in England, and it's went to Scotland and Norway and back south and across the Atlantic and all that. And it has never been to Denmark and probably never will. So here's an old map of the Outer Hebrides. You can actually, it actually looks pretty good being from 1654. You see the Monarch Isles here, just to the west, but I don't see St. Kilda there. And this is what we sailed that season. We started in Oban, and then we went a little bit around in the Inner Hebrides, and then on to Skye and over to the Outer Hebrides. So what prompted me to want to go to St. Kilda? I'd never heard about it before. The thing is, I found this book by coincidence, The Prisoner of St. Kilda, and I always like to read books about the places we go. So we bought it, and I found it immensely interesting and thought, gee, we're going to go there and see this place. I'll tell a little bit more about Lady Grange, who is the one who was the prisoner of St. Kilda for 7 years. I'll get onto that. Another thing was that I like a lot of Scottish music, and I have also seen the movie Whiskey Galore. So there was a couple of reasons for starting to go to Scotland sailing. And I think most people know that Whiskey Galore is about that as his politician that went aground with 28,000 cases of whiskey at a time where they were almost running out of whiskey. So Lady Grange, she was married to this, well, to this man, obviously, in Edinburgh, and he had some Jacobite interest, but he was also in the English Parliament in London. So he didn't really want it to be known that he had the Jacobite interest. But he was having a lot of affairs, and she wasn't liking it. So she was telling him, well, if you don't stop that, I'm going to talk about your other things that you don't want people to hear about. So what he did was he kidnapped her and then took her for a long trip across the country via Glencoe, Loch Ness, Glengarry, and then to Loch Horn, and further on to the Monarch Isles. And then in 1734, she arrived in St. Kilda. And there she stayed for the next nearly 7 years, until finally she got a letter smuggled out about her being there, not being dead, as her husband had been saying. And so somebody got her out of here, and she got back to Harris and West, and then further on to Warderness Skye. And there she died in 1745. So an interesting story. She's actually buried in maybe up to 3 different places. The thing was, there was a lot of thing about this, you know, that she wasn't really, she hadn't died that long ago, and they didn't want to find her and so forth and so on. So her body was moved at least once. But it is believed that she's buried at the Trumpen Chapel on Warderness Peninsula on Skye. So we arrived in late May, and Scotland in May is beautiful with all the bluebells. Look at that. How can you not like Scotland? And the weather is good. And then you have the fun of the nice currents. So you can go really fine one day if you just get the current right, and very short one day if you get the current wrong. So this is the sound of Lewin. And then the first thing we did was go to Art Fund because we needed to get a few things done. And beautiful days and beautiful sailing. And for the first time, we were trying to go through Corryvreckan, which of course has a fearsome reputation. Just look at all those cute little curvy things on the chart. And there are stories about 4-meter standing waves when the wind and opposing current are just wrong. So we got there, thought we got the tides right, didn't quite get them right. I think we were an hour late, which meant that around the time that we were turning into that little bay you see us turning into, we were going 0.1 knot over ground. So we were really worried that we were just going to get pushed back out again. But we just managed to get around the corner. And this lovely little bay, you're in this current, and we were in a lot of current and not going very fast. And then you get around the corner and you get in here and it's completely quiet. There's no current. It's just, there's a little bit of swell coming in, but not much. So we spent the night there just enjoying the place. So next we went across to Mull and then around that corner to Iona, where it's actually very hard to get ashore. We managed by having one stay on the boat, and then 2 of us went ashore so we could see the monastery there, which was very pretty. And then we went on to Gomatra and enjoyed a beautiful evening in another wonderful anchorage. Scotland is full of beautiful anchorages. People ask me, don't you worry about sailing there because, you know, the weather can get wild? And there's always an anchorage you can find in short distance. And of course we had to go to Staffa and we managed to get ashore there as well, with one person staying on board. And of course we had to have the obligatory picture of the boat through the cave and in front of the cave. And here we are. See, I know the sails don't look good, but it has to be said that it was the first time I was alone on the boat. And there's a lot of rocks there, so you have to sort of go back and forth without hitting some of the rocks. It's also a beautiful view from the top of the island, with a view out to Thresness Isles and Col behind. The plan was actually to go directly from there to Barra in the Outer Hebrides. But what is it they say? Cruising is just repairing your boat in exotic surroundings. So we had a thingamajig on the windlass brake. And so we needed a new Flaming, I think it was called. And so we went back to Ardfern to do that. And then decided to upgrade the anchor chain from 8 millimeters to 10 millimeters. Because by then we knew we were eventually going to go to Norway, and we knew we were going to anchor a lot. So I don't think 10 millimeters is a lot. 8 millimeters is a lot for a heavy long keel boat as the one we have. So what did we had to wait for the thingamajig to arrive. So we walked around over to Crew Haven, enjoying all the beautiful rhododendrons, which were in full bloom. They seem to have invaded that part of Scotland, and lots of beautiful flowers. By the time we got our windlass and everything fixed, the weather had turned a little bit. So we did actually try some grey weather in Scotland. We went to this, so instead of going out to Barra the way we had planned, we thought we'd go up the Sound of Mull and then go to Tobermory and go around Isle of Skye. So we turned Ardna Merchant Point, also in a bit of an interesting chop. And of course, we had to go ashore and get some heather to tie in the bow of the boat, as you do when you have rounded Ardna Merchant Point. And then we went on to our way to Skye, passing the small isles. And yes, it does get a little cold sometimes, but most of the time the weather is great. And so I had actually been to this place, this Gaelic whiskey place that is in the Sleep Peninsula on Isle of Skye. I'd been there in '77, I think, and bought that T-shirt, which I, for some weird reason, still had. So when we went ashore to get a tour of the place, of course, I got an extra tour because I could show that T-shirt from 1977. So that was kind of fun. It's a lovely little place, and they're very, very nice with the tasters. You get a fair good taste. We were lucky we had my niece along because she was then taking us in and out of the dinghy, because especially going back to the boat, maybe we were a little bit happy. So after that, we went up through the Kyleria, and then we were going to Ploughton. We did kind of think we could maybe anchor in that spot you can see where we turned in right around the corner. But even though we only have a draft of 1.5 meter, we didn't really feel that safe there. So we went all the way over to Ploughton, which is a very pretty place. And there are lots of nice anchorages and moorings. And this really blew me. I didn't know that Scotland had palm trees at that time. I didn't remember that from back in '77, but they do have palm trees. So the climate can't possibly be so hot as they actually try to tell us it is. From then on, we went to Rona, which is actually owned by a Danish woman, unfortunately not me. And we decided to take a walk over to the church cave, which is over on the other side of the island. It should be said, looks like it's a very easy harbor to get into, but you better follow the chart, and you better not just try to go straight in, because there's a lot of hard places and there's a lot of shallow places in that harbor. But it's a beautiful place and very nicely sheltered. So we walked over to the church cave, and there's this walk down there, and it's really, really steep, and it's really, really difficult. And yet the guidebook, our pilot book, said old ladies used to do it, so I couldn't really not do it when old ladies used to do it. So there's this church where they have a cross, and they have the baptism font is where water comes down from the ceiling, and they have these benches which is made of rock, and then they probably have the most beautiful view of any church out over the water. So next up was going to be Ardmore Bay at the Wardennish Peninsula, because we wanted to go and see that place where maybe Lady Grange was buried. But as you maybe can see there, it was a little bit wild, and it didn't really invite to going ashore. We went down to Stein and found a mooring there, but it was still too hard to get ashore. The Ardmore Bay is also a place where there was a big battle, because there was a church there where the MacDonalds of West, said the Scottish name there, barred the doors of Trumpen Church, Kilconnan Church as it was known then, and then set fire to the church full of the people in there. The only one who escaped was one little girl who managed to get out of the window and managed to raise the alarm. Then, of course, hearing this news, the Clan MacLeod and his men set off for Ardmore Bay, and there was a huge battle. Apparently, the MacDonalds were killed almost to a man, and the corpses were dragged and then buried in a turf dike, and therefore the incident is known as the spoiling of the dike. So, yeah, this atrocity, of course, sounds very bad, but it was actually vengeance, because the MacLeods had a massacre of the MacDonalds in the cave of Francis on the Isles of Egg a couple of years earlier. When you try to read up on the history of Scotland, there's a lot of stories like that all over the place. But anyways, we didn't get ashore because it was just a little bit too wild for our dinghy. So instead we set sail for the outer Hebrides. Lovely sunshine, lovely sailing. Well, it wasn't actually lovely all the time because we had to beat quite a bit over there. We kind of thought we could just take this one leg and then go north, but that's not how it works. But we spent a nice night in this place that it says on the map, and then we went on to Stornoway. So the Sound of Sheerand is also one of those places they warn you about in the pilot books. They say it's heavy and sometimes dangerous overfalls. We didn't have dangerous overfalls, but it was a bit of a washing machine to go through. Not too bad though. In Stornoway, I think now they actually have nice pontoons for visitors, but at the time you just tied up to this pier and there was quite a bit of tide. So we were happy to be outside this boat that was here, so that we could just tie onto that. But it wasn't all that easy to climb up and down those ladder with laundry and shopping and so forth and so on. So the figure on the right is one of the Louis chessmans, which is actually originally from Nidaros in Norway. We had a couple of days that we wanted to spend there, so we took one day where we took a bus and actually managed to make it to quite a few sites, and it just fit with taking the bus, getting off for a while, taking the next bus, getting off for a while, taking the next bus. So we got to see quite a bit. The Caroline Standing Stone was of course interesting. And the little orange man you see in the background is, I think BBC were setting something up to look at for the Midsummer's Eve. And they are quite amazing to see. The next stop then was Duncalloway, where we saw this brooch, which is a sort of a fort that, as you can see, it had double walls. So once you had climbed in that very little entrance, then you were quite safe in there. Of course, it was a fort all the way around, and then there was a roof on top. And everything is both in Gaelic and in Scottish. So this is the place, at one of these places, I managed to buy these books. Two of them actually I only bought. By Peter May. They are crime novels, all set in the Outer Hebrides. And so you get a crime story, but you also get a lot of history. And he can really describe places. So after I'd read them, there were several places we went just because, oh, he writes about this. It's really supposed to be gorgeous. Let's go there. So we'd go places just based on these books. So then we went to one of the Black House village that's actually mentioned in his books. One of them is called Black House. And this is the kind of houses people lived in then, and where they would have their looms and weave the famous Harris Street. Now we were just about ready to go further south. So the next anchorage was this beautiful place, and I'm not even going to try to explain it. It was pretty rough that day, past the Sheerand Isles, but as soon as we got in this little place around the corner, we were completely sheltered and quiet and could just enjoy the seals as they were enjoying watching us. So next day we went on to Loch Rodel, which looks like it's a complete open roadstead to anchor in, but it's not. It's a very protected place, especially at low water, because basically then there's rocks all the way around. This is the entrance when you don't go in there. You're supposed to wait till the tide is halfway up to that orange thing on the marker. And we were a little bit worried about how soon we wanted to go in there. And so some Scottish boat came by and just breezed in then. And we kind of thought he probably had a deeper keel than we. So we just followed and it went well. And when we went in, as you can see, the water was a bit higher. And then we just stayed there for the night. Because of the rocks that are just below the surface, it's very nice and quiet and sheltered. So this is the awful weather in Scotland. we were going to stop several places on the way south, but then we had this weather. Unfortunately, it was completely flat, calm, so we had to motor. But we were starting to realize, hey, with this calm weather, maybe we can do a bit of scuba diving or a bit of snorkeling when we get down near Erskay, because of course we wanted to go down and see if we could see the wreck, see if we could swim down to it and maybe find one of the bottles of whiskeys they say are still left there. I'd read shortly before then that one of the bottles of whiskeys, I think 2 of them had been found not so long ago, and when they were sold at an auction, they were sold at 80,000 pounds each. And the whiskey is undrinkable because salt water has gotten into the bottles. So we had a long discussion on the boat whether if we actually found one of these bottles, would we sell it or would we keep it because it would be kind of neat to have? Well, in the end, it was the tide was coming in when we got down there, and so we couldn't really swim down. We didn't find any bottles of whiskey, but we are pretty sure, and I'm pretty sure a few people are laughing now, but we are pretty sure that we saw the wreck because I've seen pictures of the wreck when people have actually dived on it, and it looks like this shadow of dark green in the light green. This is my GoPro trying to take a picture of it underwater. On Erskay, there's this nice pub named after the boat, and they have a little exhibition of some of the Jamaican 10 shilling notes that were found on the boat, and they also have a collection of some of the original bottles of whiskey, as you see here. And it says on the bottle that federal law forbids sale and reuse of this bottle. Apparently, it also forbade the islanders to drink it. So that was in the movie. There's this big thing about where they run around trying to hide the bottles from the excise men and so forth. St. Michael's Church, as you see on the right, is also mentioned in one of Peter May's books. So we had to go see that. And the story behind that altar is that the fishermen, they were praying for good catch, and so they got this incredibly good catch, and then they all pitched in to build this church, and then using one of a boat front for the altar. Very beautiful island, very beautiful views. It actually, you know, you really feel like, wow, I could go swimming there. That looks so beautiful. But you have to kind of like cold weather if you want to go swimming there. It's nice until you put your big toe in it. But it's definitely pretty, and it definitely looks like something that could easily be in warmer climates. So this is Prince Charles Beach, where Prince Charles Edward Stuart had his first landfall in Scotland. That was on this beach back in 1745. Supposedly, anyways. Next day, my niece was arriving by plane to Barra, and so they have this nice little airport which is only usable at low tide. When it's high tide, the planes can't land. They can only land at low tide, and they land on the sand. So they say that this airport is the cleanest in the world because the runways get cleaned twice every day. The planes that fly there are not very big, to say the least. And they have an interesting security around baggage reclaim. It's really just a garden shed that you can just walk in and grab your luggage. On to Watersay, where we enjoyed a couple of dolphins and some of the story about the Watersay raiders that took some land their way back, but I forgot the complete story of that. Nice fisherman came by and sold us a lobster. So now we were going to try to boil lobster, which we had never tried before. We had these nice live lobsters. So what do? Well, you try to.
Oh, it's boiling water.
Do it quickly.
Quickly.
There you go. Atta girl. You'll be a lobster cooker in no time.
Is there room for one more?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh. Sorry, fellow. But you gotta die.
Well, the lobster did turn out
But it's boiling.
So the lobster did turn out, and we had a lovely meal of that lobster. Mingula is another very interesting island. That's the next south. We wanted, of course, to go all the way south to the very Barrier Point to get to see all the islands in the chain. And so Mingula is interesting. There's some Vikings have been here at some point. And then they have this one place, McPhee's Hill, which has some interesting story. Because at some point they sent a ship from Barrier because they hadn't heard from anyone on the island for quite a while. And so this crewman called McPhee, he was sent ashore to see what had happened. And he went ashore and found out that all the residents had died of some disease. So when he returned to report that to the boat, they said, you're not going to come back on this ship. No, you stay here. So he stayed there and survived for a year and climbed the hill every single day to see if anybody was going to come to rescue him. And after the year, they actually did rescue him. And then when the island was resettled, the McNeil granted him land there. These are all little seals lying on the beach. And we were the only one there at that point. And took a walk over to the other side of the island to look at the bird cliffs and see what we could see. There's still some of the houses left from people who lived there. I forget when people left this island, but they did leave it eventually because they couldn't really get a pier made. So it was hard to get in and out and to sail back and forth. So it is a beautiful place. So here we are at Castle Bay in front of Kishmill Castle. And it supposedly means something like Castle of the Rock of the Small Bay. And I've read somewhere, I forget where, that McNeil was sending ships up and down the Minch, looting and pirating. So at one point, his enemy besieged the castle, and he was stuck there for a few days. They do have water out there, natural water. But of course, the siegers thought, well, he's going to run out of food at some point, and then we can go in and take him. So what he did was he wanted to show that he had plenty of food and that he could endure any siege that they could launch. So he slaughtered a dog and smeared its blood on a sheepskin and then hung it on the outside wall. And that was sort of to tell the enemy that, in fact, we have lots of food, we can even just waste it. So the enemy thought, okay, then we are leaving. In fact, actually, they were almost out of food. There's a song about it called Kishmus Galley. That's about the boats that plied up and down. So this castle for a while was just sort of left. And then in 2001, it was leased by the chief of Clan MacNeil to Historic Scotland for 1,000 years for the annual sum of £1 and a bottle of whiskey. Yeah, annual bottle of whiskey, of course. We did find the seat for MacNeil. Very nice toilet they had there, which could be flushed right out into the water. So we had to go look at some of the places that we had seen from Whiskey Galore, and we could recognize the street and the church and certain other places. And even on this very westernly southern island, there are also palm trees. Okay, so now we were really starting to think about when are we going to be able to make it to St. Kilda, because we had actually thought we might sail directly from Barra or directly from Mingulay or directly from any old place, but the weather was not cooperating that well. So there was a bit of wind coming in. And so looking at the weather forecast a lot, I kind of thought it looks like in 3 days we'll have St. Kilda weather. So we just have to find a nice spot to stay for 3 days. And we found this beautiful anchorage near Scalpay, where they have a nice cafe, the Red Arrow, this nice cafe. And it's not that easy to get ashore, really. You had to climb that ladder at the end of the pier, but the cookies were really worth it. So here we are. And also, I found the last Peter May book. So then I was completely busy for a whole day and not to be disturbed until my niece said, well, now I'm all dressed up to go to town. Let's go to the cafe and have cake. We also took a bus ride around over to Tarbert and out to Scarista Beach, and walked around, found a nice place that served us some scones and tea. We had a really good time. And these are the cakes from the cafe. And there's a playground there, but they're very serious about that Sunday has to be kept quiet. So you are not to play on the playground on Sundays. And people are still digging for, I forget what it's called, turf or something like that. So the cakes are from the North Harbour Bistro Tree Room. In case anybody ever get there, it's worth going. So the weather started to look nice. We decided to sail over to Berneray because then we would have a better leaving point for St. Kilda. This harbour was really interesting. In the pilot book, there's a picture of it where it looks like it's at least 3 times the size that it actually was. We were by far the biggest boat there, and we could barely turn around in there. But we had a nice night there. We also thought that the Northern Islands being closed on Sundays, maybe there would be something open over there because that's the Southern Islands. But no, everything was closed. Next day it was really, really foggy. We had gotten up really early because we wanted to get the tide right, because this is the way you have to sail out of there. There's a very interesting 2 sticks in the water that you have to go between, and as you can see, you can very easily go aground if you do this wrong. And don't forget, we couldn't see 100 yards in front of us for the fog, but we managed. We got through and we got on our way out to St. Kilda. Nice sailing. So St. Kilda, they have found tools that they think is about up to 5,000 years old. They also have found an Iron Age earth cave from around 2,000 years old. And they're also pretty sure that the Vikings were there 1,000 years ago because they were everywhere. So 180 people rented the land from MacLeod and tried to make a living out there, but then in 1726, smallpox entered the island. What happened was that there was one St. Kildan who visited Harris and then caught smallpox there and died from it. But then his clothes was returned to St. Kilda, and that brought the disease with them. So most of the islanders died. The only ones who survived on Hirta was 1 adult and 18 children. And then there was 3 men and 8 boys over on Stag and Armin, where they were over to catch birds. So they were basically stuck there because nobody could fetch them. And they stayed there for 9 months until the steward rescued them and returned them to the island. And then there was a repopulation from Harris. So time goes on. In 1758, we are down to 88 inhabitants. It goes a little bit up. But the main problem they had at this island was the 8-day sickness, which where 80%, they had an 80% infant mortality before day 8 up to around 1912. And they didn't know why. They just accepted that that's how it was. Within 8 days, that some of the kids would die. And so they didn't I think they didn't name them. They didn't get new clothes for them. They just waited the 8 days to see if they would die. And what happened was that eventually a nurse was allowed to, they had a doctor there at some time, but they weren't going to allow him in on the birth. But at some point a nurse was allowed to be where the birth was. And so she found out that they anointed the umbilical cord with some fulmar oil that was stored in a sheepskin storage thing, and that was probably not clean, and so it was most likely tetanus that they died from, all these children. They got a church in 1800 and the Black Houses, and then in 38 SS Wilkins stopped by And other ships stopped by, and at one point 36 of the young people decided to immigrate to Australia to have a different life. It didn't turn out well for them. 20 of them died of disease on the voyage, and the remaining 16 settled in Melbourne, where they have actually given name to St. Kilda, which is a suburb of Melbourne. So they get new stone houses after the roof blows off the old ones. They have some pretty bad wind out there sometime. Then a simple jetty was built, and they had a ship coming by yearly. School tourists started to find their way out there. They got a real pier. And then in 1926, the flu comes and 4 people died. And now they're really down to very, very few inhabitants. And one of the ones who died was the mother of an infant. So they just realized this isn't going to go on anymore. And they asked to be evacuated. So in 29th of August in 1930, the very last 36 inhabitants were evacuated. Interestingly, most of them got jobs for the forestry at Lochaline. Now, they had never seen a tree, unless if they'd been on Harris. I mean, out at St. Kilda, nothing grows higher over the ground than a cabbage. So that was an interesting kind of job to get. So here we have Borea, as you look over on it from here to. And the first thing that strikes you when you get there is all these stone hedges that are all over the place, and these stone cleats, these little tiny stone storage huts, so to speak. And you kind of think, boy, they must have been really, really bored. And then they've been building all these stone hedges when they had nothing better to do, because they did have a lot to do by getting food from birds and so forth and so on. We figured, and I'm not sure if that's right, but we figured that a lot of the cleats that they built was because if the fog surprised them, that they could easily find a place to shelter. The first thing you're told by the warden when you go ashore is make sure you know where you are at all times. The fog will come and it'll go, and you can be completely not knowing where you are. So here we also see part of the village, and the cleat you see in the picture here is the one that we were told was the one that Lady Grange was actually held captive in. Apparently whales also came by here, because you do find whale bones on the island. So this is the main street. And some of the new houses that were built were just built next to the old one, and then the old ones were just used for storage and whatever. And you see very clearly all these little stone huts, cleats on the hillside, and you see them when you look up on that hill that goes up to the right. You see they're all the way up there, sort of spaced fairly evenly out. So our main interest was to go and see this place where Lady Grange had been captured. It's a very small cleat. It has this tiny little door. They're all built so that you can shelter from the wind when you crawl in and out. You have to crawl in and out. You can't stand upright. And here you can see my niece standing in it, and the roof wasn't that much higher than she was. And this is me climbing in and out. So this is where she was kept for up to 7 years. Quite a difference from her fancy lifestyle in Edinburgh, I believe. This is then the churchyard, and in a lot of these graves, there are several coffins, very small coffins, stacked on top of each other from the children that died before they were 8 days old. This whole thing about this infant mortality was also one of the reasons why the community became non-viable. There was just not enough new people being born, new kids growing up. So it was quite a tragedy in some way, in many ways. Main Street again, talking to some other people who sailed out there. We managed to stay there for 2 nights, and it was really nice. You have to be ready to leave the place at a moment's notice, because when the swell and the wind comes, it'll come into this bay and it'll be very uncomfortable. These sheep that are here are special for this place. They're called soy sheep, and they're, because they were there for so long and they haven't been mixed with other sheep, they are still the same kind of sheep that they had back then. So the logbook says it's essential to clear out should the wind come between east and south. This, of course, was not filmed while we were there. So the church, and the door that goes into the right goes into the little schoolroom, which is interesting in the way that they have these nice maps on the walls of the world and Canada for some reason. There's no way you could see St. Kilda at these maps. It's way too small. So the St. Kildans were very, very good climbers. They would climb up and down these very steep hills to catch birds and bird's nest and so forth. And we weren't so brave, so we were just lying down, looking over the edge, looking down on this little fulmar. And Boreas, which was over on the other side of the sound, at that moment covered in fog. There's some interesting stories about St. Kilda. There's the Lover's Stone. The Lover's Stone, when a young man wanted to marry a woman, he had to go up on this stone, which was about 100 meters over the water, and stand on one leg, hold on the other foot, and turn around all the way around to show that he had good balance, so he could be a good provider and catch lots of birds from the hillsides. I don't know how many who didn't make it, but probably not so many, because they were used to climbing these hills from childhood. It's been shown that the ankle bones of the inhabitants were lengthened, probably some evolution to make them better climbers. The other picture is of the St. Kilda mail boat. At one point, they were starving out there. They really had no food left. So they made this little sort of wooden boat, and then a bladder from a sheep, and then they sent it off with a message, hoping it would reach the mainland, telling them that they were actually starving and they needed help. It did reach the mainland, and they did get help. So now we are having pretty calm weather, and so we decided to see more of the island from the outside and then sail over to Boreas. And so it's just very, here you get a feeling of how steep the hills are. These were the hills that people were climbing to, the men were climbing to catch eggs and birds. Somebody was also out there in kayaks. I do think these were actually sailed out there with the kayaks on deck. But I've heard about somebody who actually paddled all the way out there. Amazing. So this is just between Hirta and Soy, where we saw a bunch of lovely puffins. And so this is over by Boreas, and this is one of the stacks, Stack and Armin, I believe. This is a very forbidden place because the fog is there all the time. Now in this stack, people would climb from Hirta. They would sail over there, and somebody would basically jump ashore and then climb up this rock. In 1840, some sailors from some people from St. Kilda landed over here, and as they climbed up on the rock, they spotted a great auk. So they thought this was an interesting bird. They abducted it, tying its legs together and taking it back to the ship. and then they kept it. But then a terrible storm came in. So then they thought, whoa, this is probably this thing. This is a witch, and it's conjuring up this maelstrom, and they stoned it to death. And it was probably one of the last few great orcs that were left. Apparently there was some left on Iceland after this. And so there's gannets all over the place. It looks a little bit like a scary movie. There's so many birds in the air, and they're just all around the ship at all times, making a racket too. Fuldstændig. Look at them, so many. So then when you sail out, what you do is you sail in between Bury and this rock, and then there's this little rock here that you just saw in this picture. And it's a little bit scary because there's not much room there, but you could get through. And then we had seen enough of that, and then we decided to sail back to the mainland. And by now it was completely flat calm, and we actually had to motor all the way back. But we did have, my niece had a flight to catch. We could have spent extra days out there, but she had a flight to catch, so we went back. So once in a while it's a little bit coolish, and we enjoy always sitting and watching movies on the iPad. And once in a while you can enjoy the sun on deck, and this can all be, of course, within a matter of hours. Yeah, and there's always something to look at, lots of dolphins coming by. And this is a Sea and Ice and the end of my show. Should I stop sharing?
Judith, thank you very, very much indeed. That was wonderful. It was great to see you cruising our home turf. That was fantastic. And you really packed in some of the best anchorages that are on the west coast of Scotland, really.
Yes,
the Shant Islands, Pig Bay, St Kilda. I've got a wee survey actually, just to, I'm into my surveys tonight, as you probably spotted. But just while we're waiting for some questions, I'm just going to ask the audience, of which there are many, 250, what their cruising experience is on the west coast of Scotland. So we'll just yatter on if folk should have that on the screen. Have you cruised in Scotland? Have you anchored on St Kilda? Because I reckon that's almost as rare as going to the moon.
I think so.
lots of people have tried, but few have succeeded because of that thing that always smiled on you, the Scottish weather, because it's not always like that. And the midges
you say that, it's just to keep people away.
And the midges often come at you at 100 miles an hour in the wind as well. A lot of people have cruised in Scotland tonight, half the audience by the looks of things. So I'll send you that information afterwards, but yeah. It's still populating at the moment. So I'm going to ask the audience if they'd like to put their hands up and ask some questions. I'm going to come first of all to Tim Volker, who he had his hand up right from the start of the talk. So Tim, if you're able to open your microphone, I think you had a birthday the other day because we were corresponding, but Tim, do you want to ask Judith a question?
He needs to unmute.
Yeah, Tim, you need to unmute. Okay, just while Tim's trying there, we'll go to Jeff Ashton. Jeff, you can unmute now if you wish and ask your question.
I think you were just unmuted, Jeff, but then it muted again.
Okay, I'm unmuting everybody who's got their hands up. So Frank Mulholland, do you want to come in, Frank?
I've unmuted now, Linda. Yes.
So somebody's unmuted, but I'm not quite sure who that is. The poll is finished just while people are going to end that.
John, I think this is John Andrews. I've just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, John. Please go ahead.
Are you still hearing me?
Yes, John,
Yes,
loud
yes.
and clear. Go ahead.
Okay. Because we're hoping to visit St Kilda next summer, we hope, the weather conditions required to actually make a landing in St Kilda, what do you need to look for in the weather pattern to be able to make a landing and leave your boat at anchor unaccompanied?
Well, you need to have the wind coming from the west so that the anchorage is completely sheltered. And then you need not to have too much wind, because when there's a lot of wind, and also if there's a lot of swell, it will make its way around into the bay.
So can I just say the holding or anchoring,
Excellent.
how good is the holding?
The holding was excellent. No problem at all. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Judith. We've anchored there in strong westerlies offshore, and we didn't budge an inch. It was very secure. I'm having difficulty seeing the full name, but Peter, can you come in?
Yep. Hi, Judith. It's been a while since I've last seen you.
Yeah, hi, Peter.
What is your next plans? Because I know you're in Panama now. Where are you going next? When are you going to, you don't know when you're going to be able to get back to the boat, I take it.
No, we're hoping for March now, which will then make a complete year since we left the boat there. And then the idea is to go to
See the other person.
pardon? The idea is to go to Galapagos and then go to Easter Island and then to Patagonia.
Right. That'll be good. I'm looking forward to hearing about that cruise.
I'm looking forward to go there a lot. Yeah.
We've got Tony Davis, who was trying to come in last week. Tony, can you manage this week? You should be able to unmute your microphone. Tony Davis, can you hear me? Everybody's being very bashful tonight.
He looks unmuted.
Yeah, he looks like he can talk, but maybe his microphone's not working so well. We'll go to Brian Cudmore. Brian, you should be able to unmute now. Everybody's struggling tonight. Can anybody open that microphone? Bob, you were in St Kilda a year or two ago. Do you want to tell us about your experiences rock climbing in St Kilda, Bob? You're muted, Bob.
You have to unmute.
Yes, I had the privilege of taking Dave McLeod over there to do some rock routes, and he did two superb routes on the west side of Herter Island. But actually it was quite interesting because there was a gale forecast from the south. So for the first night, we went round to Glen Bay on the northern side of the island. And very difficult to put your anchor down because it was very deep and very steep too. But I made the climbers row ashore with a line, and so we really just laid to a line there. But it could be worthwhile people knowing that if you do get stuck in Village Bay and have to abort, there is the possibility of sheltering on the northern side of the island. Yeah. But it's quite a tricky place to anchor, so a line ashore is the best defense, really.
Yeah, we looked at that acreage, but it's very deep, so a line ashore is what you'd have to do.
And of course, my female member of the crew went and danced on the Mistress Stone, made sure that she was okay for partnership.
Thanks, Bob. We've got a comment from Alex Kohler, which is very, very relevant. about the Bob Bradfield fantastic Antares charts, Judith. Have you used those? Do you know about them?
Oh yes, I know them, and I
art
use
of,
them.
Art of sneaking into remote anchorages, but
They are fantastic, and I mean, I of course you can do it without them, but you're so much better off if you have them, because all these nice little maps, very detailed, and they're the ones that got me into that place called Thingasdijk, something like that.
Can you try that one again?
Thingasdijk, Thingarstaigh. It's on one of my slides, so I can say.
Okay. Well, you obviously did well to get back out of it.
Yeah, no, they're very, very helpful, and really worth.
Do you run them
really worth supporting the guy doing it?
Do you run them on an iPad, or how do you run them?
I run them on the iPad. I do all my navigation on the iPad. We have Navionics on the iPad, and that's what we use.
Yeah. And for those people that don't know Antares, it's not for profit. I think a subscription for a year's worth of upgraded charts is about £10, if I remember right.
Yeah,
and,
it's a really good price for something that's really worth having.
Transform people's Scottish cruising experience there. We're very, very good. I'm going to go back to the questioners who've got their microphones open, I think. Brian Cudmore, can you come in now, Brian? Nothing heard from Brian.
Maybe his question is on the chat or something. I don't know.
There's a lot of questions. Can you see the chat, Judith?
I can open it.
Lots of thanking ones. Nice presentation. Great. Enjoyed the photography. Thank you. Terrific presentation. We sailed in the area before quite a lot of the various boats and plan to sail again in 2021. Thank you. That's from Andy and Sally Brown. Somebody commenting that the holding is good.
Somebody pronounced my Thingasdijk.
Oh, well done. That's more than I can. I see there are lots of incidents of Emily Winter. I think they've used her log on, but I'm going to ask Emily to come in. I suspect it's not Emily, but your microphone is ready to be opened if you want to come in, Emily Winter.
Somebody also asked about what resources I used.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see this.
Of course. Hamish Haswell Smith. Yes, the fantastic.
That's really good to have.
Yeah, every island in Scotland above a certain acreage, isn't it? Yeah.
I think it's about 40 acres or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's a superb book. Yeah.
That's worth having. And then, of course, the Clyde Cruising Association pilot books and the free Welcome Anchorage booklet that actually is also quite good.
Yeah, which is free in every marina and printed version, or you can download it on the PDF. So fantastic.
Simon, it's Martin and Stephanie. I'm not sure if we're unmuted.
You are unmuted, Martin. It's great to hear from you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Judith, we were up there a month ago in a camper van. I'd always sworn never to have one, but threatened Stephanie with a camper van every time something went wrong on the boat. We had a month in the islands, and so it was great to see so many of the places we'd actually visited on land. My question is really for your wider sailing experiences, particularly linked to bobs and high latitude sailing. We've had problems getting insurance recently for high latitude sailings. With your vast coverage that you've been doing recently in the northern latitudes, have you had problems getting insurance for your trips recently?
If you ask me, I managed to get Pentaneous for Svalbard as an add-on to the insurance I already had. So if we talk high latitudes, I also try to get insurance for going south, and all I can get is till 50 degrees south. And that's it.
Thanks. Pentaneous recently said no to us, and it seems everyone now is finding it very difficult. But thanks for that. We'll keep looking. Thanks.
Sorry.
Thank you, Martin. John Rapp has got his microphone open. John, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you very much. We'll be crossing next spring from Chesapeake to the Azores and then on to Ireland and Scotland before we put the boat up for winter. And I'm just curious if there's some suggestions as to where we could do that. Knowing that from Scotland, we'll be heading probably north to the Orkneys, Shetlands, and then over to Norway.
We spent 3-4 seasons in Scotland, and every time just leaving it somewhere for the winter. So we have left it in Ardrossan. Was that how you pronounce it, Simon?
Ardrossan.
Yeah, that's one place. And then in just north of Oban, there's a couple of places there. There's one Bacaldin way into a little loch. And then I know some other people who had theirs on another, somewhere north of Ullapool. I'm sorry. Isle of Bute is in, that's my husband saying Isle of Bute, but that's that's not smart if you're going to Orkney and Shetland. But the other two places are definitely easy to get to and easy to be in and very reasonable.
Yeah, John, there's lots of places to leave your boat in Scotland. Ardfern is very good, which is where featured in Judith's talk. I must put a plug in here for Creve Haven because that's a mile from our holiday home in Scotland, where we have our annual Scottish Open House weekend, open to all OCC members. In fact, anybody who's dialed into this call, all 181 of them, which is usually in May, but kind of got postponed this year till the lockdown was over, and it was very informal in August when I think about 4 people came, which was our limit at the time. So yeah, Creve Haven, Ardfern, Ardrossan's very popular with North Americans. And online tonight, we've got the OCC port officer for the west coast of Scotland, or north of the Mull Kintyre anyway. The Reverend Bob is full of advice. I'm sure he'll be looking out for you. So make contact with Bob Shepton when you get there.
There's 3 immediately come to mind: Oban Marina, and Dunstephane's just north of Oban, Creran Marina just north of that. So there's actually plenty of places to choose from when you get here.
And we have had no problem.
Good, thank you.
We had no problems getting a place. We would start looking for a place about 2 weeks before we wanted to stop the cruise. And they've been very, very helpful. And when we've left the boat, they've offered to watch it for us and go down and take a look at it. And in some of the places have had webcam, so we could take a look at it every day from home, which was very nice. Wish I had that now. So yeah, don't worry about that. You can easily leave your boat there.
Super.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We look forward to seeing you, and maybe drop by if we do have our open house next year, which
we hope.
everything crossed. Yeah. Anybody else want to come in with questions? I think we've invited quite a few who have got their mics open, but they've stayed mute for whatever reason.
Somebody's asking the name of my boat. It's Touche, and it's an Island Packet 380, so it's about 38 foot long. It's a long keel, heavy boat, which is what I prefer. I think Bob would agree with that.
Yes, except the 38 foot's exceeding it a bit.
Yeah.
It's again back in your luxury liner because it's got hot water and a pillow, I gather. But
definitely can't sail on that.
Thierry Courvoisier, who I happen to know has his boat in Creve Haven at the moment, Judith, is asking if you could send a reference to the guide, which I think is the Haswell Smith book.
Sure, will do. Will do.
So you'll get Thierry's email address when we send the attendees list to you.
Yeah.
And I hope they're recovering quickly from a brush with COVID, I gather.
Oh, really? Gosh, I wasn't aware of that. Gosh. Okay. So we've got a comment from David Smith saying, thank you, Judith. It's a long time since we sailed in the west coast of Scotland, and you reminded me why I must go back. I think we met in Svalbard in 2015 on a Boreal 44 called Selena, Celean. David Smith.
I think so, yeah. But was it in 14 or was it in 15?
He's written 2015.
2015. Okay, yeah.
Paul Rogers, you can open your microphone and come in if you wish.
Yes, I've had the privilege of sailing in Scotland several times. I have an American boat that I couldn't get to in Denmark. And I'm curious, I mean, I've either got to get to Norway, well, I probably overstood anyways, but what's going to happen with the EU next year? Are we going to be able to go into Britain and essentially clear out of the EU and avoid the VAT?
Are you asking for? Did you say you were American or you English?
No, I'm an American. I'm an American. Camp in Maine.
But then you shouldn't have any problem. Is your boat in Denmark now?
Well, the boat's in Denmark, but I mean, I have to get out of the EU, and I'm not sure avoiding the VAT, and I'm just not sure maybe England will work now, or Scotland, but you know, in the past we've had to go to Norway or Russia or Tunisia or somewhere else every other year to get out.
Yeah, Norway would probably be it.
Or the UK. The UK is very definitely out of the UK from January the 1st, for better or for worse. So you should be fine with the VAT element there.
So Paul, where in Denmark is it? Do you want me to go have a look at it?
It's in Augustenburg.
Oh, yeah, I can't go there at the moment.
Thank you.
It's in the other end of the country.
Right.
Yeah.
That was.
I can highly I've left the boat several times in Ardfern, and I can highly recommend them.
More questions or comments on the chat line. Hi, Judith. We ran into you in the South Pacific. We may run into you in the South Pacific next year in Ecuador.
Oh, may, yeah, because we haven't been there yet.
There you go. And hoping to be on our way in April. Rick on SV and Independence. So you've got a date in the Pacific. That's great.
Oh, cool. That would be nice. Yeah.
John
well, leave your email and we can get in touch.
John Andrew comments, only topsail. Brighton could give us Arctic insurance, but very expensive. Actually, I know for a fact that topsail aren't giving Arctic insurance anymore. We used them for a couple of years in Greenland and had to leave. We've got a question from Pat Murphy, who wants to know how to unmute your microphone. Pat, if you put your hand up, which is a command in the participant window.
Let me just say, somebody asked me when.
I will open your microphone. I'll allow you to open your microphone. So, Pat, if you put your hand up. Sorry, go ahead, Judith.
No, somebody asked where I was from in Denmark. I live just north of Copenhagen. So that's it.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute Pat. Allow her to talk. Pat, you should be able to open your microphone now.
Yes, I got a note. Is that it? That's me.
Yes, loud and clear, and a very familiar voice from 1999. Aldebaran, Aldebaran, Aldebaran. Go ahead.
Judith, thank you very much for a very enjoyable talk. And I've cruised Scotland a number of times, but never went as far north as you're talking about. And I did a 9-year circumnavigation with my late wife. And we've been to Galapagos and everywhere else on and down to New Zealand and Australia. And if I can help you with a bit of advice anytime and give you a report on it, you're more than welcome to contact me and I will certainly help you on it. Now, what I did when we came back from our round the world trip, I fitted a thermometer over the side of the boat connected to my auto helm. So if the water temperature gets cold going north, it just turns the boat back down. But we were supposed to cruise Scotland this year with the Haute Yacht Club, who are celebrating 125 years. And unfortunately, with the situation, it had to be cancelled, but they're talking about going back up again next year. And hopefully with my partner and that we'll be up there next year around the Scotland area. So Judith, thank you very much for a very interesting talk.
You're very welcome.
Well, thanks, Pat, and do drop in on our Scottish Open House if it does happen. We've got a comment from Leslie Washburn saying, thank you for a great presentation. To John Rapp or others who plan to travel north from the Azores to Scotland next year, I would like to keep in touch as I plan to pick up from Tessera next spring and head north too. So there's a mass migration to Scotland you started tonight, Judith.
Oops, I shouldn't have done that.
Oh yeah, the more the merrier. Scotland's had a hard time this year with.
Yeah, that's right. Go there, spend some money.
Everywhere, of course. VAT advice from this is Jeff Duggett saying VAT advice from the Cruising Association is think about boats separately from the owner. The boat is the only asset they, brackets EU and UK, are interested in. I wish the UK knew what was happening on January the 1st. It's getting very close. Somebody saying we're in Denmark. Oh, you've answered that one, haven't you? Thanks for a great presentation, Stephanie Grace Foot. Thank you, Judith. Great presentation. Lots and lots of comments, Judith. 46 more fresh ones.
Oh, yeah, I see the 6. For some reason, oh, now I can get it. I haven't been able to open it. Now I can.
Okay. Andrew Craig Bennett, thank you very much for a very nice talk. Peter Simonson says, for your yacht insurance in odd places at competitive rates, I know a few sailors that are happy with the service of this fellow, and he gives a link, which I'd have to click to know what it says, but yeah, some advice there. Anybody else want to put their hands up and I'll bring them in? Judith, I think you've run out of questioners, which is a rare feat, but a great evening. Thank you very much.
That's good. I hope I answered everything everybody wanted to know. But anyways, they can contact me, right, if they want to.
Of course they can. And we've been cruising there for years, and you certainly taught us loads about the history and what the geography, lots of things that I didn't know there. So that's fantastic. And I take your hat off for choosing all the good anchorages in one trip. You really did do very well there. And you stayed the right side of the Mull and Kintyre too. You didn't waste too much time down in the Clyde. Oops.
I actually spent my first season in Scotland in the Clyde. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's a different talk.
One year we had the boat in Port Bannatyne, the first year in Scotland.
Okay. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to come back in. Bob, do you want to put a plug in for your cruising area?
No, except if anybody's coming up into the area next season, don't forget to contact me, and I'd be only too delighted to greet you.
Fantastic, Bob. Oh, we've got a question in from Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
Ellen, oh, it's disappeared off my screen. Ellen, who did the talk, of course, on French Polynesia.
Ellen Leonard
is complimenting you on your talk. Ellen, do you want to come in and we'll bring you in? It'd be great to have you from Hawaii if that's where you are.
That's amazing.
I'll see if I can open you up. Ellen, allowed to talk. Ellen, your microphone should be good to go if you want to come
in. Okay, I think it should work, right?
Yep, loud and clear. Go ahead. Nice to hear from you.
Nice to hear you again, Ellen.
Yeah, I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was just back from French Polynesia. So if you decide to make a detour en route to Patagonia next year, let me know and I can give you some tips on good places to go.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I recommend it if you're going to sail that far.
Yeah, we don't know what we're going to do once we've been down to the tip. If we will go up on the east side or if we'll go back on the west side. We haven't decided on that yet. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to see in the Pacific, so
yeah, I know.
Take your time about it.
The thing is, I really want to go to after Patagonia. I really want to go to Alaska.
Oh well, there you go. Then you go right through Hawaii. You have to let me know.
Yeah, exactly. No, because I don't know. I seem to kind of be attracted very much to the slightly colder places.
Yeah, well, I love Alaska. It's probably one of my favorite cruising grounds.
Yeah, I remember your talk. Remember we met in Miami in 15, I think it was.
Yeah, I think that's right. You were talking about Svalbard. That was a lot of fun.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. This was great. I have got Scotland on my list now.
Oh,
excellent. Well, right. If you have questions too, just write. There's a lot of people here who can give you good advice, I'm sure.
Tony Davis has written saying, how does he come in on the microphone? So I've opened your microphone. Tony, do you want to try again? No, still can't hear you, Tony.
I can hear him weakly. Maybe he has to move closer or something. Oh, no, he's muted again.
Yeah. The technology's defeated him, I think. Just having a quick browse down the list and see if there's anything fresh in there. Somebody's complimenting the showers in Port Bannatyne.
Oh, but you know the toilets in not Port Bannatyne. What's the main city? Well, what's the main town of Bute? Do you remember?
So
they have these award-winning toilets.
Okay. Rothsay.
Yeah, Rothsay. They have these toilets way back from the Victorian age, and they've actually won an award for them.
Yeah.
The only thing is the men's toilet is much better than the women's. So you have to sneak in there when nobody's in there.
This is more information than we actually need, even on an OCC talk, Judith. That's fantastic. Again, lots more comments. Judith, I think we've come to the end. You've done your hour and a half or thereabouts. Fantastic. I will send to you all of the feedback that we've got. We've still got 120 odd people online, so you've hung on to your audience as well as attracted them, which is fantastic. I'd like to remind those people that are interested in the OCC Carol concert, which is definitely your first, that will be at 8 o'clock next Thursday night. And
why not?
We'll send out a link probably to the whole membership. So goodness only knows how that will end up. But we hope that everybody's going to be in fine voice, and we hope that Brian will be up to keeping control of it, because I'm not. So on that, thank you very much, Judith. And
well, thank you very much. And thank you so much for the series of talk. It's been such a joy.
It's been great fun to organise, and it's been
Hi, everybody. Good night. Good night, everybody from Ireland. Good night from Ireland.
From Ireland.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Thank
good
you.
night from Scotland too, then.
Thank you, Judith. That was really good. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Judith.
Look forward to singing with you next week.
Pardon?
Look forward to singing with you next week.
Yeah, maybe I won't sing so loud, but I will participate.
Anders.
Yeah.
Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Cheers, Judith.
Bye.
Bye.
Judith, that was great. Thank you ever so much. Wonderful. And it was so informative. Everything was there, the stuff that I should have known and should have read and hadn't a clue about.
I was worried I was putting in too much, that I was going to take too long.
I think that the story of the Fulmar oil and I mean, it's a classic piece of medical history. I think, didn't they have a midwife who was actually doing that there?
They had a local midwife, and she wasn't going to let anybody else in on the birth.
Yeah, and
for some reason, this nurse that got out there, after I think she was there a couple of years before finally she was allowed to be, participating or attending a birth along with the midwife. And that's where she realized what they were doing, putting this Fulmar oil on the umbilical cord.
And isn't it interesting in this pandemic year how much disease actually influenced the history of St Kilda over the best part of a millennia, with smallpox, tetanus, influenza.
Didn't take much. It didn't take much. Of course, they were so separated for so many years that I think it's like everywhere elsewhere in the world where people came in, they brought disease with them. And
I guess like every indigenous population, really, like the Inuit in the Arctic, etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very susceptible to our diseases, and COVID's brought it home to the rest of us. But St Kilda,
now.
St Kilda is such a wonderfully isolated place, even though it's actually allegedly only 40 miles from,
45 miles from mainland.
Well, Scotland.
Oh, yeah, so 45 miles from outer Hebrides, sorry.
Yeah. Because it feels almost mid-oceanic, doesn't it, with the northern weather systems and poor anchorages and, well, non-universal shelter. It feels like a really remote destination. But it's quite interesting, the number of people. I'll send you the results of the poll, but there was about 30 odd people that had been out to St Kilda, which is quite a high proportion.
I remember when I've been talking to people, just sailors you meet, and you say you've been to St Kilda. I've quite a few times I've gotten the ones like, oh, I have always wanted to go there. How many times did you try?
Yeah, you need to set aside the time, isn't it? Because you just
have
to wait for that weather window, and
you have to wait for the weather window. Yeah.
Most people have got some kind of cruising agenda, or they've got to make some flight or somewhere else, and they just don't have the time, or that they just don't get lucky.
No, really.
It is worth holding out for it. But for you to go to St Kilda and the Shants on the same trip and be able to stay in both places is just wonderful. Because the Shants is the accessible version of St Kilda, but still quite a tricky place. Still quite a tricky place to actually stay overnight. You need pretty settled conditions there.
We sailed past twice without being able to go there. So yeah.
No, super. Thank you very much, Judith. I'll get this all uploaded and I'll send you all of the information that we collected tonight, and that will have everybody's email addresses. So I think there's a few people that have asked you for your email address, but you'll be able to pick that up from the chat line and
please give it to them if they want to. Yeah.
Great. Lovely. I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much. And for those
looking forward to next week.
I'm not. For those,
it's going to be fun anyway, so
it'll be noisy. So good night to the other 45 that are still online after.
Oh my God.
Right. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for listening in.
Cheers, Judith.